Hey there, I'm Ethan. A few months back, if you had asked me, I would have said I had a pretty good marriage. My wife, Sophia, and I had been together for almost 12 years, and we had two amazing kids, Lily and Oliver. Life was comfortable, stable, at least that's what I thought. It wasn't until last summer that I started sensing something was off. Sophia had always been into our garden, a hobby she'd really taken pride in. She'd hired a new gardener, a guy named Liam. He was younger than us by a bit, and he had that easygoing charm that just made people instantly warm up to him. At first glance, there was nothing to worry about. He was friendly, did a good job with the plants, and Sophia couldn't stop talking about how great he was at his work. But then small things started bothering me. Suddenly, Sophia was spending more and more time outside, hours longer than necessary. She'd come back in the house looking flustered, sweaty, and when I asked, she'd brush it off, saying she was just learning new gardening techniques or helping Liam. I tried not to read into it. She had always been passionate about the garden, so I convinced myself that maybe I was overthinking it. Then came the secrecy with her phone. She'd laugh at texts, but as soon as I walked in the room, she'd hide her screen. I told myself it was nothing, just me being paranoid. After all, we had a family, 2 kids, a life together. What reason would she have to risk all of that? But no matter how hard I tried to shake the feeling, that unease just wouldn't leave me. One night, I finally decided to bring it up. When I confronted Sophia, she immediately got defensive, telling me I was being absurd. "Ethan, you're imagining things. Liam's just the gardener," she said, rolling her eyes like I was some kind of fool. I wanted to believe her, but her attitude, the way she said it, just didn't sit right. Still, I dropped it, hoping I was wrong. But her behavior kept changing. She started putting more effort into her appearance, dressing up to go outside, even wearing makeup when she'd just be in the garden. It didn't make sense. I tried to rationalize it. Everyone likes feeling attractive, right? But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a warm Friday, and I got home early from work. The kids were at a sleepover, so the house was unusually quiet. I noticed the back door was open a crack, and out of curiosity, I wandered into the garden. That's when I saw them, Sophia and Liam, wrapped around each other, kissing like a couple of teenagers. My stomach dropped, couldn't breathe. They didn't notice me at first. When they finally did, Sophia jerked away from him, scrambling to act like it wasn't what it looked like. "Ethan, it's not what you think," she stammered, but the guilt on her face said it all. The way she clung to him in that moment, it broke something inside me. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was having an affair with the gardener. I turned around and went back inside, my head spinning. How could I have been so blind? What the hell was I supposed to do now? That night was a blur. Just images of them together replaying in my mind, like a film I couldn't turn off. I kept asking myself the same question. How could she do this to me? To our family? The next morning, Sophia acted like nothing had happened. That made it worse, her pretending everything was fine, as if I was supposed to just forget what I saw. The anger was boiling inside me, but I needed more than just that moment in the garden. I needed proof. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. She was in the shower, and I grabbed it, heart pounding. The messages between her and Liam were all there. Flirty texts, explicit conversations, even plans for when they'd meet up again. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my email. She wouldn't be able to deny it now. When she came out of the shower, I was waiting in the living room, my hands shaking from both rage and heartbreak. "We need to talk, Sophia." The look on her face told me she knew exactly what was coming. She sat down and the guilt hit her hard. "Ethan, I'm sorry," she whispered, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Didn't mean for it to go this far? You've been sleeping with the gardener, Sophia. How could you do this to me? To our kids?" Tears were streaming down her face now. I was lonely. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I shook my head in disbelief. "Didn't mean anything? You lied to me every single day. How can I trust anything you say now?" She reached out, trying to touch me, but I pulled away. "Don't." Just don't. She begged for counseling, saying she still loved me, saying we could fix this. But all I could feel was the betrayal. I grabbed my keys and left, needing to get away from her, from the lies, from everything. I drove around for hours aimless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them in the garden. Every time I thought of Lily and Oliver, my heart broke a little more. How could I explain this to them? How could they understand something like this? By the time I came home, Sophia was still crying at the kitchen table, pleading for us to try and work things out for the kids' sake. I was exhausted. All right, I said, finally giving in. We'll try counseling, but this isn't going to be easy. I don't even know if it's possible to fix what you've broken. Sophia promised she'd do whatever it took, but I couldn't bring myself to feel hopeful. The days that followed felt like living in a fog. We moved through the house like strangers, hardly speaking. Our first counseling appointment wasn't for another week, and every day felt like an eternity. Then, one evening, I came home from work to find Liam in the kitchen. Just seeing him in my home made my blood boil. What the hell is he doing here? I demanded. Sophia looked nervous. Ethan, I asked him to come. We need to talk. Talk? I glared at Liam. There's nothing to talk about. Get out of my house. Liam mumbled some kind of apology and left. I slammed the door behind him, turning to Sophia, furious. After everything, you still let him in here? How could you? She broke down, but I couldn't feel anything but anger. You need to choose, Sophia. Him or me. You can't have both. She sobbed, promising to end things with Liam, but the damage was done. We'll see, I said coldly. But if I catch you seeing him again, it's over. The next few days were tense, but she kept her word, cut him off completely. We started counseling, and while it was a small step forward, the anger and hurt didn't fade. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was her with him. About a month later, Sophia came to me with an idea I didn't expect. Ethan, maybe we should move, somewhere new where we can start fresh. Leave all of this behind. The thought of running away from everything was tempting. But deep down, I knew the truth. No matter where we went, what she did would follow us. That pain was here to stay, something we'd have to face over and over until it either tore us apart or made us stronger. The days turned into weeks, and Sophia's betrayal loomed over us like a dark, suffocating cloud. The initial shock had faded, but the pain, that was still as sharp as ever, infecting every corner of my life. I found myself snapping at Lily and Oliver over the smallest things, dodging conversations with friends, and barely holding it together at work. My world had been turned upside down, and I was flailing, trying to find some kind of balance in the wreckage. Counseling became this weird mix of hope and frustration. Some days it felt like we were making headway, peeling back all the hurt and trying to rebuild something. Other days it seemed like we were just saying what we thought the counselor wanted to hear, going through the motions. Sophia was putting in the effort. She was more present, more attentive, but it always felt like too little, too late. One night, after a particularly draining session, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, nursing a drink. The kids were already asleep, and Sophia was upstairs, probably crying herself to sleep again. I couldn't bring myself to go up there. I just needed space, time to think. The quiet of the house felt oppressive, and I stared blankly at the family photos hanging on the walls, at the life we'd built together. It all seemed tainted now, overshadowed by her betrayal. I picked up a framed picture of our wedding day, a day that had once been the happiest of my life. Now it just felt like some cruel joke. A wave of emotion hit me like a punch to the gut. Anger, sadness, humiliation. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I wanted to scream, to break something, but I knew that wouldn't fix a damn thing. Instead, I let the tears come, silent and relentless. I hadn't cried since that night in the garden, but I couldn't hold it back anymore. The next day at work, I was barely functioning. My coworkers could tell something was off, but I brushed them aside, muttering excuses about stress. The truth? I was hanging on by a thread. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted, dreading it would be another text from Sophia. begging for forgiveness that I couldn't give. My performance was tanking. I missed deadlines, forgot meetings, and more than once, my boss called me in to ask what the hell was going on. I lied, of course, promising to get back on track, but inside I had no clue how to do that. The emotional weight of it all was crushing. I felt like I was drowning in it, disconnected from everything and everyone around me. The joy I used to find in my kids, in my work, in anything really was gone. In its place, there was just this constant ache, gnawing away at me. One night, as I was tucking Lily and Oliver into bed, Lily looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes and asked, "Daddy, why are you sad all the time?" Her question hit me harder than I expected, and I forced a smile, brushing her hair back gently. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. Daddy's had a lot on his mind." She nodded, like she believed me, but I saw the worry in her eyes. Oliver, too, wasn't his usual cheerful self. He'd been quieter, more withdrawn, and it killed me to see my kids affected by all of this. My inability to cope was spilling over onto them, and that was the last thing I wanted. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Sophia came to me. She looked wrecked, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her voice shaky. "Ethan, I know I've hurt you. I know things will never be the same, but I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for over a decade, and felt a flicker of that old affection, buried deep beneath layers of anger and mistrust. "Sophia, I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. You've broken something inside me that may never heal." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, but I'm not giving up on us, Ethan. I can't. I love you too much." Her words, as genuine as they were, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to believe her, to trust that we could somehow rebuild what had been shattered, but I wasn't sure if I had the strength to even try. As the weeks stretched into months, the tension between us became a constant undercurrent in our lives. The kids could sense it, and despite our best efforts to shield them from the worst of it, they felt the strain. Lily and Oliver became more withdrawn, their laughter less frequent. It tore me apart to see them suffer because of us. Sophia tried, I could see that. She cut ties with Liam immediately after that night, throwing herself into counseling, suggesting we go to therapy together. We went, though reluctantly on my part. No matter how hard she worked at it, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of betrayal or the doubts that gnawed at me every day. One evening, after another brutal therapy session, I found myself lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling. Sophia was downstairs, probably crying or journaling, as she did most nights now. My mind was racing, replaying everything from that first moment of suspicion to the confrontation in the garden, to the miserable days that followed. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. It wasn't just hurting me, it was hurting the kids. They deserved better than this tense, toxic environment filled with distrust and unspoken resentment. The next morning, I asked Sophia to take a walk with me. We headed to the park, a place we used to visit with the kids when things were simpler. It was a beautiful day, but the weight on my chest made it hard to appreciate. "Sophia," I started, taking a deep breath, "we need to talk." She looked at me nervously, her eyes filled with fear. "What is it, Ethan?" "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything," I said slowly, trying to find the right words. "I don't know if I can ever truly forgive you. The trust is gone, and without it, I don't see how our marriage can ever be the same." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't interrupt. "I know you've been trying, and I appreciate that, but it's not working. I can't keep living like this. It's not fair to me, to you, and definitely not to the kids." Her voice trembled. "So what are you saying? Are you giving up on us?" I shook my head. "I'm not giving up, Sophia. I'm just acknowledging that some things can't be fixed. I think we need to separate, at least for a while. We both need space to heal, to figure out what we really want." She broke down, sobbing. "I don't want to lose you, Ethan. I know I messed up, but please, don't give up on us." Her words tore at me, but I knew this was the right choice. "Sophia, I love you, but love isn't enough to fix what's broken between us. We need time apart to see if there's even a chance of rebuilding, or if it's time to let go. We walked back to the house in silence, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavy between us. Over the next few days, we made arrangements. Sophia would stay with her sister for a while, and we'd share custody of the kids. We both promised to make sure Lily and Oliver knew this wasn't their fault, and that we loved them more than anything. The day Sophia left was one of the hardest moments of my life. Watching her pack up her things and say goodbye to the kids, knowing that it marked the end of an era, was almost unbearable. But deep down, I knew it was the right move. Once she was gone, the house felt emptier than ever. Yet in that emptiness, I found a strange kind of peace. It was like I could finally breathe again, no longer suffocated by the constant reminder of her betrayal. I threw myself into being there for the kids, focusing on work and trying to heal. It wasn't easy. Some days, the loneliness felt like it might swallow me whole, but I kept telling myself that time would eventually ease the pain. Sophia and I continued therapy separately, and after a few months, we started meeting occasionally to discuss the kids and how things were going. The initial separation brought some relief, but the anger I felt toward her, and toward Liam, still clung to me like a shadow. I needed to channel that frustration somewhere, and before long, the idea of revenge started creeping into my mind. I knew it wasn't the healthiest way to deal with things, but the thought of making Liam pay for what he'd done to my family was too tempting to push aside. One evening, I found myself scrolling through his social media accounts. There he was, smiling, smug, carefree, posting about his gardening projects and hanging out with friends like nothing had happened. It made my blood boil to think he was just living his life without a single consequence. That's when I decided to hit him where it hurt most. His reputation. He'd just started his own gardening business, and Sophia had mentioned more than once how much he relied on word of mouth and online reviews to get clients. So, I created a few fake accounts and flooded every platform I could find with negative reviews. I painted him as unreliable, unprofessional, and even suggested inappropriate behavior with female clients. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to my buddy Noah, who worked in IT security. At first, Noah wasn't too thrilled about the idea, warning me about the potential legal fallout, but after hearing the full story, he reluctantly agreed to help. Together, we hacked into Liam's email and social media accounts. Not to destroy his life entirely, but enough to throw a wrench into his personal and professional world. Within a week, his business began to crumble. Clients canceled appointments, and his stream of new inquiries dried up. I watched from the sidelines as he posted frantic messages, trying to do damage control, but it was too late. His reputation was shot, and there wasn't much he could do to salvage it. At first, watching Liam fall from grace gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. But that feeling didn't last. My nights were still plagued by restless sleep and haunting memories of Sophia's betrayal. It didn't take long for me to realize that revenge, as sweet as it seemed in the moment, wasn't going to heal the deep wounds Sophia had left. Couldn't fix what was broken inside me. Gradually, I began to shift my focus from hurting others to healing myself. I started taking better care of myself physically and mentally, picking up old hobbies that I had abandoned over the years, things like hiking and playing guitar. I even joined a support group for people who had gone through similar experiences. To my surprise, it helped more than I expected. Hearing other people's stories made me feel less alone in my pain. Then one evening, a few months after we had separated, Sophia reached out to me. She wanted to talk, to see if there was any chance we could salvage what was left of our relationship. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I agreed to meet her at a park nearby, where we could talk without the kids overhearing. When I saw her, she looked different, more fragile, filled with remorse. "Ethan," she started, her voice shaky, "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never undo, but I still love you, and I want to try to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at her, this woman I had once shared so much with, and I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also a deep sadness and a faint glimmer of the love we once had. "Sophia, I don't know," I replied honestly. "I've been working on healing myself and I've made a lot of progress. But the trust? That's still gone. I don't know if we can ever get that back." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I understand. I've been working on myself too, and I realize how much I took our relationship for granted. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want a chance to prove I can change. Rebuilding our lives together was slow and painful. Sophia and I were both committed to trying, but it wasn't a smooth road. During this time, I leaned heavily on the support of friends and family. Their encouragement and different perspectives were invaluable as I worked through the complexities of forgiveness and trust. One of my closest friends, Caleb, had been by my side since the beginning. We'd known each other since college, and he was like a brother to me. When I first found out about Sophia's affair, Caleb was the first person I called. His support helped keep me grounded. One night, we met up for drinks, and as I updated him on the latest with Sophia, he listened intently. "Ethan, man, I don't know how you do it," he admitted after taking a sip of his beer. "I don't think I could ever even try to work things out after something like this." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "Honestly, Caleb, I don't know if I'm strong or just desperate to keep my family together. Every day feels like a fight." He nodded sympathetically. "Just remember, you've got to take care of yourself, too. It's okay to put yourself first sometimes." My sister, Emily, was another pillar of support. She lived a few hours away, but she made a point to visit whenever she could. Emily had always been fiercely protective of me, and she didn't hide her anger at Sophia for what she'd done. My parents, though shocked by the news at first, provided a steady foundation. They'd been married for over 40 years, and their relationship was something I had always aspired to. They shared advice, told me about their own rough patches, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. "Dad, how did you and Mom get through the tough times?" I asked one night, hoping for some wisdom from someone who'd seen it all. He paused, thinking. "Ethan, marriage is about commitment, but it's also about understanding. There were times your mom and I wanted to give up, but we always remembered why we chose each other in the first place. If you can find that reason again, there's hope." My mom chimed in, always the voice of reason. "But sometimes, Ethan, you have to know when to let go. If it's causing more pain than joy, the best thing you can do is walk away." Their advice, though conflicting, gave me a balanced perspective. It reminded me that there wasn't necessarily a right or wrong answer, just what was best for me and the kids. As Sophia and I worked through the healing process, I often found myself drifting into memories of our past. These flashbacks were bittersweet, a reminder of what we once had and how far we'd fallen. One evening, I sat on the porch, staring up at the stars, letting my mind wander back to the early days of our relationship, when everything was so much simpler. We'd met in college, both of us just kids at a friend's party. Back then, we couldn't imagine anything tearing us apart. Sophia had always been the life of the party. Her laughter could fill a room, and her smile was captivating enough to make you forget about everyone else around. That night, I was immediately drawn to her, and we spent the entire evening talking and laughing like we'd known each other for years. By the time the night ended, I knew one thing for sure. I needed to see her again. Our first date was simple, but it felt perfect. She packed a picnic, bringing homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and even a bottle of wine. We sat under this big oak tree in the park, talking for hours about everything. Our dreams, our fears, and what we wanted out of life. It was one of those days that just felt right, like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I remember thinking that this was the start of something special. As our relationship progressed, we faced our share of challenges. I remembered how Sophia had supported me when I lost my job. I was at rock bottom, but she reassured me, reminding me we'd get through it together. Her faith in us gave me the strength to push forward. And then there was our wedding day, another memory that used to be one of my happiest. We exchanged vows under a beautiful arch of flowers, surrounded by family and friends. Sophia looked stunning, and as I watched her walk down the aisle, I knew I was the luckiest guy alive. That whole day felt like a dream, a beginning of a new chapter with her. Then came the birth of Lily and Oliver. I'll never forget the first time I held Lily, this tiny little bundle of love and responsibility. Parenthood wasn't easy. Sleepless nights, early morning feedings, but it brought Sophia and me closer. We were a team handling the chaos together. But as I sat on the porch now, with all these memories flooding back, they were tainted. The Sophia I was thinking about felt like a completely different person from the one who had shattered my trust. The happy memories we had together now came with a sting, overshadowed by her betrayal. It wasn't just the good memories that resurfaced, though. I started remembering the small cracks that had formed over the years, cracks I had ignored. We had drifted apart in many ways, overwhelmed by the demands of work and parenting. Communication between us had broken down, and we began taking each other for granted. I couldn't deny my part in the deterioration of our relationship. One memory in particular stood out. About a year ago, Sophia tried to talk to me about feeling lonely. I was too preoccupied with work and too tired to really listen. I brushed her off. Looking back now, I realized that was a turning point, one of those moments where I could have been more attentive, more present. Maybe if I had been, things would have turned out differently. Confronting these memories was painful, but it also brought me clarity. Our relationship had always been a mix of highs and lows, joy and struggle. The affair was a devastating blow, but it wasn't the only problem. It was a symptom of deeper issues that had been festering for a long time. The next day, during our counseling session, I opened up to Sophia about these flashbacks. I told her about the good times and the moments when things had started to falter. Tears ran down her face as she listened, hearing the pain in my voice. "I miss those days," she said quietly. "I miss us." "I do too," I admitted, my voice softer than I expected. "But we can't go back. We can only try to move forward." Our therapist nodded. "These memories are important," she said. "They remind you of what you've built together and what's at stake. But they also show you the areas where growth is needed. Healing is about acknowledging the past but focusing on what's ahead." We left that session feeling a little lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. It wasn't a solution, but it was a step forward. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. But as the emotional and mental strain of the affair dragged on, it wasn't long before the stress began to take a toll on me physically. I started getting frequent headaches, feeling constantly fatigued, and just generally run down. I figured it was all tied to the emotional turmoil, but it became clear I needed to address it. One morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and felt dizzy. That's when I knew I needed to see a doctor. Despite everything going on between us, Sophia insisted on coming with me. She looked genuinely worried, and even though things were strained, I appreciated her concern. The doctor ran a series of tests, asking about my symptoms and lifestyle. When he sat us down with the results, it was clear my body was reacting to the stress I had been under for so long. "Ethan, you've got high blood pressure and elevated stress levels. We need to address this before it turns into something more serious," the doctor said, his tone serious but calm. I nodded, feeling relieved to finally have an answer but also concerned about what it meant. "What do I need to do?" He laid out a planned medication to manage my blood pressure, a healthier diet, regular exercise, and stress management techniques. He strongly recommended I keep seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional side of things. Sophia stepped up, helping me make the lifestyle changes the doctor recommended. She started cooking healthier meals, joined me on evening walks, and pushed me to stay committed to my exercise routine. It was strange, this shift in our dynamic, but it was welcome. We found ourselves working together again, this time for my health. One evening, after a long walk, we sat on the porch. Sophia looked at me with determination in her eyes. "Ethan, I know this has been incredibly hard, but I'm here for you. We've both made mistakes, but we need to focus on moving forward, for your health, for the kids." I appreciated what she was saying, even if part of me still held on to the hurt. "Thanks, Sophia. I'm trying, but it's just a lot." "I know," she said softly, "but we're in this together, and we'll get through it." During this time, I also reconnected with the kids in a deeper way. We spent more quality time together, doing the things that made us all happy. Playing board games, riding bikes, watching movies. These moments became my source of joy and healing. One night, as I was tucking Lily and Oliver into bed, Lily looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you feeling better now?" I smiled, feeling warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm feeling better, and I'm gonna keep getting better. I promise. As I left their room, I realized that despite all the challenges, I was finding my way back to a healthier version of myself. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I felt more ready to face whatever lay ahead. The pain from Sophia's affair would never completely disappear, but we learned to live with it, to grow from it. We made the decision to focus on the future and on the love we had for our children. After months of trying to rebuild our relationship, Sophia and I came to a mutual decision. It was time to part ways. We realized that despite our best efforts, we couldn't fully restore the trust and connection we once had. It was hard, but it was the right decision for us and for our kids. The divorce process wasn't easy, but we kept things amicable for the sake of Lily and Oliver. We agreed on joint custody, making sure the kids knew they were loved and supported through the transition. They took the news better than we expected, partly because we'd been open about the changes in our family. Sophia moved out and eventually moved in with Liam. At first, the thought of her being with him reignited my anger and sense of betrayal, but over time, I've come to terms with it. She seems genuinely happy, and at this point, that's all I can really ask for. I'm learning to let go of the resentment. As for me, I've been focused on rebuilding my life. I stayed in the house, providing some stability for the kids. We've built new routines and traditions, and while it's not always easy, we're managing. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and even started dating again. It's been a slow process, but I'm learning to enjoy life on my own terms again. Work has improved too. With the emotional chaos behind me, I've been able to focus and even took on some new projects that reignited my passion for my career. My colleagues have noticed the difference, and I'm proud of the progress I've made. The kids are thriving as well. Lily's gotten into painting, and Oliver is all about soccer. We spend a lot of time together, and I make sure to be there for all their important moments. Therapy has remained a constant in my life, helping me process my feelings and continue moving forward. I've stayed connected to the support group, and it's been a source of strength to hear from others who've been through similar experiences. Looking back, I realize this journey has been painful, but it's also taught me a lot about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of taking care of myself. Life doesn't always go the way you plan, but that doesn't mean it can't still be good.